Yes. Well, so the war was breaking out, and I was drafted. I didn't explain why, but I don't think. But I was underweight, did not get my commission from ROTC. That was the reason I was. The draft board said, "All right, doesn't make any difference to us. Come along." And so instead of going in as a second lieutenant, I'm going in as a private. And this was quite a change. And Betty had been promised a big wedding back in her hometown. She'd already made arrangements for that. We had to scuttle those. And but at any rate, she was a great gal. And she had to take a first time she'd ever taken a train ride. She rode from Des Moines to Chicago, had to change trains in Chicago to a different station, and then go east to Philadelphia. So the trip was at least 1,500 miles by herself, and she did a great job. And when you get into Philadelphia, the station where she got off is not a big station, so they get off on the track along the track, and you had to go down the crowd and find out and look at each person to see where she was. But we met, and it was great. That's prior to a wedding. So when the wedding took place, then she was going back to live in Des Moines with her parents, and she had to retrace her steps back through with the trains. And I went off with the draft board, and the first thing I knew, they shipped me to Atlantic City, where we'd been on our honeymoon. We'd actually been over there on our honeymoon and saw the soldiers there in the Air Force on the boardwalk. And that was just an incoming station for that, and we were there about 2 or 3 weeks. And I of course had ROTC and had training and drill instruction, so they put me to help to teach our recruits how to drill, how to march, and that was routine. And we lived in hotels there. They were the rooms were bare with GI equipment, but they had taken over the hotels for the use of the Army Air Force. And then next thing I knew, we were shipped. They took us, people that were chemically trained, some chemical knowledge, were shipped to Alabama, Atala, Alabama, which was outside of Gadsden, Alabama. And it was a chemical warfare camp. It had just been opened up. A very small camp, but it was brand new. And streets were not paved. They had barracks built, but no telephones or anything like that, so you had to go into town to make phone calls. And it was pretty rough. And they had us digging holes, digging ditches for them, drainage ditches for the highway, for the roads and things. And so we were really rough laborers for a while. But almost the first night that we were there, one of the men that was on the regular Army job died from spinal meningitis. Went overnight, and they what do you call it? Locked up the whole camp. We weren't allowed to go in town or anything for a week till they scrubbed down the mess halls top to bottom, and we never had another man die from spinal meningitis. But we were there for 13 weeks, and this was, well, I just, for one thing, I'll never forget what old first sergeant, who was an old Army man, he said to the troops that's lined up there, I don't know, your heart better belong to God because your ass belongs to me. And this went over like a lead balloon, but at any rate, this was my introduction. Of course, I had already had some earlier training in chemical work with chemical warfare department. It was using 2-ton containers for chemical weapons, chemical gases, chlorine and phosgene, and the other gases that were used. And then we also had a large supply of grenades that were all hand grenades for you know, I'm short on words. At any rate, there's an assortment of grenades. We were there for Christmas, the first Christmas away from home, and they didn't admit no affairs for helping troops out there at all. Most places, you know, they have a USO or other affair where, but they had nothing for us. And all you could do is go down to the river, we went through town and watch the river go by for a while, and for what something to do on Saturday and Sunday. And the chapel services were held. We had chaplains there. And our telephones were in the hotel in Gadsden, the nearest town. And we could get in there and stand in line, get the use of the telephone and call home. And I called home to Betty. And while I was there, I got a letter from Betty. This is several weeks after our marriage. I got word that she was pregnant. And I got word from her in a letter. The letter I'm sorry. She said the letter she sent me did not get to me. It said that it went to a black fella whose name was Albert. And he returned her letter by saying, I don't know how this happened, I don't know anything about it, but I'll take care of you. And Betty sent this back to me, and I looked him up and relieved him that he was not the man. But at any rate, we shipped out of there after 13 weeks. We were promoted for corporal and given the title toxic gas handlers. We were able to handle chlorine and you know, it's been a long time. I've forgotten some of the names. Other gases that we had. Some were in big 2-ton containers. A lot, and then we had big trucks with hoists on to handle those. Big 2.5-ton trucks. And most of the people had some training in chemicals at least, so they were not all green. We shipped out of there to St. Louis, and that was a center point for the Air Force for people ready to go overseas. And at St. Louis, they put us through some training to get ready to go overseas. We had a 21-mile hike, for example, as a training unit. And we also had some leave because we were going to go overseas, so they gave us 7 days leave. And I was able to go to Des Moines and visit with Betty. So that was really nice. We enjoyed that very much. While we were at St. Louis, it was Jefferson Barracks, Georgia. Jefferson Barracks, it was called, right in town. They gave us Alaskan uniforms, white uniforms and parkas and all that stuff. So we got an idea where we were going to go. Just a limited number of us. And we shipped out by train to go to Seattle. And we were in Seattle for about 2 weeks waiting for a ship to take us to Alaska. The trip to Alaska was by boat, of course, and it was the North Pacific can get pretty rough. This is after Christmas. This is getting into January, and I got seasick on the ship, and so did a lot of people. On this ship, we had 7 people in bunks, or in what do you call them?
Hammocks?
Hammocks, one on top of the other. And some of them were getting sick, and it was a dirty mess. And unfortunately, I was able to escape that much of it, but it was difficult. And at any rate, we arrived in south of Anchorage in Alaska, and they went into Fort Richardson, which was was an army base in Alaska, and we were just in a unit ready to be assigned to a permanent unit. It was okay there, and they assigned us to Air Operations Chemical Company that was already up there, and some of those people were relieved when we got there to come back. There were about 15 of us that went into the companies, and we lived in a barracks, regular GI barracks, and there was one of the men there that I befriended, who volunteered for the Army, and he had inner ear trouble. How they missed it in the examination, I'll never know, but they did. And every night he was in misery with that inner ear problem. But he would get a pass and go in town every night and get drunk, come back 2 in the morning and turn all the lights on in the barracks. He had to get into his bunk. You see, they were all in wide open bunks. And nobody ever fussed about it because we knew that he was just getting some relief from his painting. But at any rate, that was an interesting thing about it. All the time I'm in the Army, I'm trying to go to my officers that I'm going to apply for a commission. I've had all the training, all this that you've done me so far, I've had before, almost all of it. And I'm commissioned, I should be able to get a commission. So I gave all the background and the thing. The letter was about that thick with all the endorsements from people and all the proof of my training. And that had to go through channels, in the Army now, through every element, from my company to the battalion to the, and the base commander had to endorse it. Then go to the next headquarters for Alaska to endorse it, and then into the north to the command back at Seattle. Anyway, it got all the way back to Washington, and it came back to me about a month later and said, "There's no openings for chemical officers right now." Anyway, so actually, we had some munitions out there, some chemicals, but there was very little to do. There was no assignment for us to do there. We were just like firemen in a fire department sitting there waiting for, this is after they'd had the attack at the Aleutian Islands. And most of the activity was down, all of the activity was down there. Some of it was down on the mainland of Alaska too, but it was very small. And so life got pretty boring. In fact, some of the people, not in our unit, but some of the people in our command in the air base there applied for transfer to the infantry. They wanted to get into the action. They were tired of sitting around. Now they knew Betty was pregnant, because I was not going to volunteer for action. So to relieve the monotony, I was able to take correspondence courses. And I took one in mechanical engineering at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, by mail. And that was interesting. It was all steam engineering mostly. And it was old material, but it was something to do. And I also took Morse code training. I put on my parka and my heavy warm clothes and walked across the runway to a classroom where they had Morse code work. And my background in music helps to learn Morse code. And so I took that, and that took some time. And the thing that really helped you out was the chaplains. On Sunday morning when we had chapel, they knew what we were going through. And to make this most exasperating, some of the men that I had met in chemical warfare training, I had to go to special chemical camp between my junior and senior year in college in Maryland for 6 weeks. And we had people that were transferring from their branch. I was with artillery. I wanted to get into chemical. And the biggest chemical warfare schools in the country are Ohio State and Texas A&M. And they had by far the biggest number of people at that training camp. The rest of us were minority groups. But we got to know each other in those, we were in there for about 7 weeks getting training. And incidentally, in that training we had one mortar, one that had been built by the Chemical Corps. And the difference from that and other mortars is it had a rifled barrel, made it much more accurate. And they also made a lot of the chemical weapons were made for 4.2 mortar. But I digress. Let's see. We were there for 18 months, I guess it was. And there were 2 winters. And finally a letter came to, a radiogram came through, and it was my commission. This was wonderful news. Before that happened, though, I got a telegram, a radiogram from Betty that she produced a daughter. And this is in wartime. All that transmission could not be in plain English. They had it typed out, and some of the GIs had changed it so it came to me because I had triplets. Anyway, it was good news that she had a baby in the head without a lot of problems. Another thing that happened then was the doctor that delivered her told her that she has the body just ideal to have babies. And she said that just made her glow to know that. She never had a bit of trouble with pregnancies. And so that made our life a lot nicer. At any rate, when I got my commission, I had to find a uniform somewhere, and I found one in Alaska to wear. That they assigned me to the same unit that I was in as an enlisted man. It was the chemical unit, so. But I saw some of these same people were now officers that I had seen at school that summer, and they were not allowed to talk to us. See, they're officers, and there's a definite distinction between being officers and being enlisted men. And you don't talk and have conversations with enlisted men, or at least that's some people took it that seriously, some did not. There was one or two good men that I saw that were good friends, came around and talked, but that's being a junior officer in the company that I was in, Air Operations Company. They gave me all the nice jobs to do. For example, I became soldier voting officer. That year was a national election. Every state had different rules, and I had to help the men to do their voting. I also was mess officer. That meant I was in charge of the mess hall. I didn't know much about that, but they had some cooks that were already trained in it, and they were good. And I was also, that was among my duties. Anything that anybody else didn't want to do, they passed it on to the junior officer. But at least it was better than being bored to death. I was far from bored. I had things to do. And so finally we got orders to go back to the States. And I don't know. The Navy had replacements come in, and we were shipped back. The shipment back was a little different than we did not go back by ship. Well, partially we did. We went back from across the Bay of Alaska and came into Canada, and we took they had one train for our 890th Chemical Company, and we had that whole train to ourselves. It was to go from I've forgotten the name of this town on the Pacific Ocean, and went right across Canada and right straight north to well, at any rate, just north of where we were going to go down in Arkansas. And this is unstoppable. I thought, gosh, every city we get, we're going to sit waiting around. No way. They rushed us right through town. And to get exercise, we had the engineer stop their train in the field. We got out and got some exercise to keep active. And it took us about 30 hours. I don't know how many hours it took. It was really a rapid trip, and then south down to Arkansas. And in Arkansas, they had a band met us, and they welcomed us back to the States. And it was it had been a station during the war, so it was permanent buildings. we were there for a couple of nights at least. And then we had a chance to get out of Alaskan uniforms. And it was, I haven't forgotten what month it was. It was getting pretty warm in our wool uniforms. And of course we were able to talk on the phones. Then we could talk and tell. We couldn't tell Petty that we were coming home until we got down here. And that was military operation, and it was secret. And at any rate, I was able to get some time off from there, and I went to Des Moines and picked up Betty and Madeline, and they came back with me into the southeast. And we went into some of the southern towns, bounced around quite a bit, and met some interesting people in different places. We were at Army Air Force bases in the South, and these were Air Force units that were there with somebody. Some of the men were fighter pilots who had returned from duty and were there, and other types. And one of our men I met was a professor in chemical engineering at LSU, and he was a captain in the chemical corps. His name was Bernard S. Pressburg, and we got to know him, Betty and I and Madeline. And when we got to those bases in the South, when we were able to, I was practically a junior officer of anybody in the command, and I had a pretty high record. I was available to have any barracks that were available. Some of the bases had, some of them had apartments, just rough apartments. One of the places we were was in...
You're getting a phone call there if you want to get it.
Oh, gee.